Hey everyone, Flufayy here. So it's been just over 2 months since Hypixel released its first game in a long time in Sheep Wars, and I wanted to quickly revisit it, see how the game is doing, and see what's changed since I played on week 1. Now, as someone who does a lot of Minecraft minigame videos, the initial release was pretty exciting for me because since I'd come back to making videos, Hypixel, the biggest server ever, had not made any new games. Sure, Dropper got out of the prototype lobby, but I meant a new experience, and Sheep Wars sorta was that. My first video on the game was based purely on my own first impressions, and I made sure not to read the forums or watch any videos on it, because I wanted to experience the game completely blind and not be influenced by anyone else's opinions. I've had a few instances where purposefully ignoring the consensus has led to me having a wildly different opinion on a minigame than several others, but I was pleased to see that my take on Sheep Wars was relatively close to it, at least in a couple aspects, although I definitely differed from a considerable amount of people as well. One takeaway I had from my initial experience was that the core gameplay was pretty good. I like the variety in the kinds of sheep you get, and I found trying to maneuver around the map as it slowly deteriorates to be very engaging. I never felt bored playing the game, even in the small stretches of downtime. I did think the maps were a bit big for the amount of sheep you have during the early game, but this never really ruined the experience for me. I still thought it was fun. My biggest criticism of the game, though, was the overall structure of how you would win and lose it. The game was a 6v6 where the winner was the first team to win 3 games. It's just like Wool Wars is, and I'm assuming this decision was made because Hypixel eventually plans on putting Sheep Wars in the Wool Games lobby alongside Wool Wars. It makes sense to give your connected games similar scorekeeping systems, however, this system completely ruined several rounds of Sheep Wars. If you're losing and you don't believe you can come back, there is zero incentive for players to stay in the game. Within just my first hour of gameplay, I had played a considerable amount of games where so many of my teammates left that by the end I was in a 2v6. It's not fair, and it's not a fun way to win or lose. And I'll admit, I expected Hypixel to be too stubborn to fix this issue. Hell, I've been on record saying I think Hypixel botched the release of Wool Wars 2 and that the first of 3 wins format and players leaving issue also hurt that game. I made a whole video on Wool Wars last year if you're interested in my more detailed takes on that, but at least in that situation, it's easier to get a party that won't leave because it's only 4 people. But imagine my surprise when I came back to this game recently and saw that, oh my god, they actually fixed it. Games only last 1 round now, so you're not going to have to deal with players leaving after being down 1-0 or 2-0. The biggest problem with the game, it single-handedly killed the experience several games, and it's fixed. It's awesome. Not only that, but they also increased the timer from, I believe, 3 minutes to 10, which is great because 3 minutes wasn't even always enough. To be honest, I'd have been happy if they stopped there, but I actually gave it another pretty solid quality of life improvement. You now get messages in chat when you hit a player with your sheep, along with how much damage it did. This is really good because I could not always tell, and if you saw my initial gameplay, you'd know I reacted often with surprise when I killed someone with my sheep. I didn't really know I was doing any damage at all. This allows me and other players to know what I'm doing right and wrong and what works and doesn't work. It's really useful for improving your skills. Honestly, I thought I'd be pretty rusty when recording this video, but I felt that just having that indicator allowed me to adjust pretty quickly and all around have a successful gameplay session. Now, there were some critiques I saw of Sheep Wars that I neglected to cover within my initial video, and I found them to be kinda interesting. When the game first showed up, I was expecting people to be in my camp of enjoying the game, but really not caring for that initial first to 3 wins format. However, there was more pessimism than I was actually expecting. I mean, literally one of the first replies to the game's announcement on the forums was a long paragraph telling Hypixel to literally stop making any new games. And a lot of people agreed with the sentiment behind the post. It has way more positive reactions than negative ones. So I figured it would be interesting to cover this since that opinion is pretty much the exact opposite of what I've been preaching for the past year. The main sentiment behind this post is that Hypixel has a lot of minigames already and not enough resources to support all of them, which is true. Until you can do that though, you shouldn't be making new minigames at all, and that this is just another game that's gonna die immediately. I do agree that, Hypixel neglects a lot of its games, but I also think that's kind of by choice. I don't know, it doesn't make sense for Hypixel from a business perspective to spend a lot of time and energy on smaller games, which is, let's be honest, most of the games on the server. Personally, I think Hypixel does have the means to do both updates to old games and make new games in a way that is time efficient, because I've been on the server for a long time. It's something they used to be able to do. It just seems that the server has been really slowing down in productivity the last few years. I think it has to do with the fact that Skyblock is so much bigger than everything else on the server that there is an inherent risk to spending considerable time on any other game. There's just not as much of a return on your investment, so it puts the server in a weird position where other games and new games aren't getting enough resources put into them. So while I agree that Hypixel does need to do more to support its older games, I don't think Hypixel needs to focus on updating them before making new games. They need to be doing both and taking risks. I'd argue that new games are more important for the server right now because the alternative is what's been happening for the past few years. The server slowly losing players and each game getting less and less relevant. Updates help maintain that player base, but they're not going to do enough on their own. Hypixel's been coasting off their success for a while now and they hadn't made a game in a long time, so they had to do more if they wanted to start really growing again. Granted, I said it myself in my last video, Sheep Wars was never going to be that game that takes the server to new heights. It doesn't do enough to move the needle and to make large content creators want to play it and inspire others to play it and all that. I think it's premature to say whether or not Sheep Wars will stay alive long term though. Obviously the player count's gone down a bit because it isn't, new anymore, but we'll see where it stabilizes. The other thing that caught my attention is a decent amount of people said that this was one of many examples of Hypixel taking other servers' game modes. I touched on this in my responses and my comments, but I'd like to reiterate it here since I've seen this notion a ton of times, and I think it's worth discussing. Historically, Hypixel's most well-received and popular games have been their own variations and spins off of other games, like that's what Bed Wars was, for example. But they make them considerably different from their source material with original maps and ideas that weren't in their initial concept, like Skywars adding the Soul Well and Mega Mode and all that stuff. More often than not, they're creating a different experience with the same game, or at least making the most polished way to play it. There's also cases like UHC Champions, which is so much different from other UHC servers that myself and, many other people played the vast majority of their UHC games off of Hypixel because we preferred other versions of it. Sheep Wars is similar to Mineplex's old minigame Bomb Lobbers, and apparently an MCC thing more recently, but I feel like it does enough to still be considered its own thing with all the sheep variations and the original maps. Actually, I've visited a lot of servers for this channel, and many of them, especially cracked Minecraft servers, completely steal Hypixel maps and copy every single idea as closely as possible. Hypixel gets stolen from more than anybody, which I guess makes sense because they're the biggest server, but you get what I mean. God, I feel like a Hypixel PR rep for that segment. I'm sorry, guys. I feel gross. Apparently someone in my comments also told me that Sheep Wars was developed by the same guys that made the game Sheep Wars was based on, which was apparently before Mineplex Bomb Lobbers even existed. Now I don't know if that's true, I don't care enough to research it, but I do think that's pretty interesting, because it's not really copying if the same developers are redoing the idea. I don't know, I wouldn't think so. So a few months later, what is my conclusion on Sheep Wars? I think the game's main issue getting fixed is massive for the game's long-term future, along with the quality of life changes. After how I ended up feeling about Wool Wars, I'm just happy with the direction Sheep Wars is headed toward. The gameplay is pretty good, and I feel more incentivized to play it now than I did when it first came out. That being said, it's still not going to single-handedly bring Hypixel back to its glory days or anything like that. Let's not kid ourselves here. But it's something new and something fun, and at the end of the day, that's all you can really ask for, right? I'll see you guys next week. Take care, everyone.